All right, everybody, welcome back into Cherry Picking. Today's video, we're going to be going over the biggest bust from this year's fantasy hockey season so far. I have 4 players to talk about in this video for you guys. 4 pretty big players too, all guys that were going in the first 25 to 30 picks and have really dropped off. They're all outside the top 100 when you're looking at the fantasy hockey rankings on yahoo.com. So very interesting to see some of these guys where they are. Some of them definitely, I think, let a lot of fantasy owners down, I would say. Others, I think you could kind of see the regression coming, but we'll get into these players and talk about some of the reasons why these guys didn't have as such good years. The first player, I think the most obvious and has definitely disappointed the most fantasy owners, and that's Jonathan Huberdeau. Now a Calgary Flame, last year a Florida Panther, and looking at his stats, 52 games played, just 10 goals. He had 30 goals last year, 26 assists, 12 power play points, just 84 shots. I think he had over 220 shots last season, and then playing just 17 minutes of ice time as well. I don't think it was unrealistic to put him where he was at the beginning of the season, where he was getting drafted. He was a top 12 pick on Yahoo. His ADP was 11th, so going in that first round. He had one of the best winger seasons to date last season with 85 assists and 115 points. And as I mentioned this year, just 36 points in 52 games, really just not productive as last season. But you look at Florida's roster last year and who he was playing with compared to who he's playing with on Calgary. Last year, he's playing with Barkov, Sam Bennett, Claude Giroux, Anthony Duclair, Carter Verhaeghe, all guys who can score at an elite rate, and even Eric Ekblad and some of the offensive defensemen that they have as well. I think the unrealistic part that you can look at is Flames thinking that they could replace 200 points from Matt Tkachuk and Johnny Gaudreau with Jonathan Huberdeau, Nazem Kadri, and Mackenzie Weegar. Tkachuk and Gaudreau are goal scorers and were the guys. I think Daryl Sutter kind of wanted to change that narrative this season and bring in guys that it could be almost like a whole team effort, and that's just really not working for them because they haven't been able to score at all. I think he was trying to bring more balance to this lineup, but you look at, I think he did a good job of that, but further down in their lineup, like their third line has arguably been one of their best lines this season. You look at a line comprised of Blake Coleman, Andrew Mangiapane, and then Michael Backlund, all guys that are having really good years this year. They're creating a ton of offense compared to Huberdeau, Lindholm, and Kadri, who've all been very mediocre so far this year. Huberdeau has also been bounced around the lineup, so I don't think he's necessarily just been in the right situation to success on this Calgary team. A lot of people had them as a Stanley Cup underdog because of what the moves they made this offseason, but it's turning out to be not as good as what people, I guess, anticipated, and Jonathan Huberdeau is one of the big reasons for that, unfortunately. All right, so the next fantasy hockey bust we're going to be looking at from this season is none other than Patrick Kane. His ADP was 40th. Going into this season, so right around that third round mark. So far this season, 50 games played, so only missed a handful of games. He's 9 goals, so less than 10 goals, which is just shocking to see from Patrick Kane. Even if he is like the tail end of his career at this point, 26 assists, 16 power play points, 165 shots, so his shot total is still pretty decent, then playing 20 minutes a game as well. So at the beginning of the season, I actually did hear that Patrick Kane had some lingering injuries. I think it was a lower body injury that he was going through and that he was going to play the season regardless of this injury. And I guess he's been playing with this nagging injury throughout the year. But my question is, like, why would you do that at this point in your career? First of all, Chicago sucks. I think they knew from the beginning of the season that this was going to be a tank, try to get Connor Bedard at some point. Like, I knew, or I think all the players on this team knew that there was no chance that they were going to make the playoffs at any point this year. But maybe it was for his draft stock. Maybe he was looking to go to a cup contender because obviously those rumors have been flying around all season long. But yeah, he's the 40th player off the board and right now 205th in the NHL or in fantasy hockey rankings when you're looking at Yahoo standings. You only missed a handful of games. It's just his production has been way off, way lower than we've ever seen Patrick Kane produce at before. 9 goals is just a crazy number. I can't wrap my head around that at this point. But you look at who he's playing with too. Like, he doesn't have a lot of help. Taves just got put on IR for the rest of the season as well. He's been in and out of the lineup too. Taylor Radish and Max Domi are pretty good guys, but just completely different to who we used to see Patrick Kane playing with and when this Chicago Blackhawks team was an absolute juggernaut. So in terms of his trade value at this point, I honestly thought he was going to go to the Rangers. I don't think that's necessarily out of the question, considering they do have a decent amount of capital with some of the young guys they have in terms of Capo Caco and Alexi Lafreniere, but I still think it's a little bit more far-fetched now that Tarasenko's over there. I don't really know where else he would go. I don't really see him going home to Buffalo at this point. I don't know if LA is going to pick him up. I've heard them tied to maybe some trade talks with Jacob Chikrin, so if that happens, there's no chance that Patrick Kane will go over there. So he might just stay and rot in Chicago, unfortunately. But in terms of fantasy hockey, just a huge disappointing season for Patrick Kane. All right, the next guy we're looking at on the Columbus Blue Jackets, Johnny Gaudreau, been definitely one of the bigger fantasy hockey busts this season. He was being taken in the first 20 picks in a lot of drafts this year. His ADP was 19th. His current rank is 111th, so outside of the top 100. Johnny Gaudreau didn't take the money in Calgary or New Jersey, and I think he ended up taking like a little bit less money to go play in Columbus for whatever fucking reason. I feel like he definitely is regretting the decision not playing with New Jersey, because they have definitely been a huge surprise this year and are playing really well. And shockingly enough, his numbers are underwhelming in Columbus. Like, that doesn't happen to every single player that tries and goes and plays in Columbus. There's been so many superstars or star players that have gone through there over the last 5 or 6 years now. The last really, really productive player is probably Rick Nash. But I think the situation itself for Johnny Gaudreau just not really anywhere to succeed. I think it's a similar situation to Patrick Kane, except Johnny Gaudreau voluntarily put himself in Columbus. Patrick Kane, has just been in Chicago forever. This team also has been littered with injuries as well, so that's obviously, you can't put that on Johnny Gaudreau. Zach Werenski, their leader, main guy on the back end, has been out pretty much the entire season, got hurt early in October, November. Patrick Laine been in and out of the lineup, one of the other guys who's supposed to be scoring all these goals for Columbus. And then they have a lot of young guys, but I just don't think they're there yet. Guys like Kent Johnson. He's always been able to score, but his shooting percentage this season compared to last year. Last year we saw it at 15%. This year it's dropped down all the way to 10. And the crazy thing is too, his shot volume is decently the same as last year. If not, he's shooting the puck more. But he's playing a minute more of ice time this season than he was last year. So you just see the different skill levels of these two teams definitely has affected Johnny Gaudreau. And I think he's just been way less efficient in this time in Columbus. And I'm not totally giving up on him in Columbus yet. I think there are a lot of factors this year that were out of his control, like I mentioned, with injuries, a really tough division that they're playing in too. This team hasn't been together. A lot of new faces in the offseason as well. So I'd like to give one more full season to Gaudreau in Columbus to see kind of what he does. I also don't think making a coaching change would be a terrible call here. Brad Larson has just not been it, in my opinion. You don't really hear much about this guy, and I don't know too much about him, but from the 2 seasons that he's coached in Columbus, it really hasn't been that impressive. So maybe making a little change could spark Gaudreau and Laine, depending on who they bring in. All right, so the last fantasy hockey bust that we're going to be talking about, JT Miller. This is probably the least underwhelming of the bunch because of his numbers so far this year. He's not quite a point per game, but 49 points in 55 games played so far this year. But a lot of people were high on JT Miller going into this season. He was a top 25 pick. His ADP was 22. And I don't blame people, because last year he had 32 goals and 99 points with the Vancouver Canucks. This team is just a dumpster fire this year. It seemed like they weren't really set up for a ton of success going into this year. Like there were so many moving parts and so much unknown with this roster and even management at this point too. You got the whole thing with Bruce Boudreau that went on, and then the situation with Bo Horvat not getting extended, but JT Miller got extended. Then Bo Horvat maybe, wanted to get out of Vancouver and finally did, got traded to New York for honestly a decent package coming back for Vancouver. I think that was honestly the only thing they have done right so far this season, was moving on from Bo Horvat after, he was definitely a sell high, because he was having his best seasons by far, scoring a ton of goals for Vancouver. So good on Vancouver doing that. But I think some regression for JT Miller heading into this season was not far-fetched at all, and we're seeing it. 19 goals and 49 points in 55 games is still, it's not enough for a guy who's taking the first 2 rounds of fantasy hockey within the first 25 picks, right? Last year he had 32 goals on 206 shots. He's shooting arguably more this year, mainly on a power play basis, but his shooting percentage has dropped from 12 this year, and last year it was 16. But the only other time in his 13-year career that we've seen his shooting percentage around 16 was his first year with Vancouver. Like, you look at this team, it's just so weird. Connor Garland leads all players on this team in 5-on-5 in shots on goal with 102. I think JT Miller's third on the team, still behind Elias Peterson. It changes when you're looking at the power play, but Miller's still third on the season in expected goals for, behind Peterson and Bo Horvat, who's gone now. And then Andrei Kuzmenko, someone who's honestly probably stolen a little bit of value from JT Miller so far this year. His expected goals mark is right next to him. He's been playing really well, and the Vancouver Canucks just extended him too. So he'll be a part of this project moving forward. But JT Miller, a little bit, as I mentioned, not as big of a bust as some of those other guys, but still definitely someone that needs to be mentioned when you're talking about biggest bust in fantasy hockey this season. All right, thank you guys for tuning in. Let me know what you thought of the biggest bust so far this season. Let me know if there's any guys that I missed. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you guys next time.